overall, I think it's a really, really good application. And obviously, you got 2 acceptances. I think one to a DO and one to an MD school. And you're gonna be a doctor. We have an awesome session for you right now with an amazing guest who has volunteered as tribute to be our first guest for Mission Accepted, our potentially new series where we review students who have gotten into medical school, right? If you have watched my application renovation videos, students love those videos. They love to see me breaking down applications and looking at them and picking them apart and really giving feedback on what could have been improved to potentially get them in, right? And it's just like maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, right? And nobody really knows except for the schools who ultimately rejected those students. But our student today reached out actually not very long ago and was like, I got off my wait list. I got to go to my dream school. And I said, hey, like, would you be interested in checking this out, being a guinea pig for us? And she said, absolutely. And so we're going to bring her on and we're going to have some fun today.
Well, I'm going to duck off the stream for a little while, guys, so that there's more room on the screen for Ryan and Maral. But you're going to love her. I've met with her personally, and you're going to be so thrilled by her story.
I love it. All right. Thanks, Rachel. And Maral, welcome to National Premed Day. How are you?
Hi, I'm very happy to be here. How are you?
I am great. I'm excited to have a chat with you. First of all, congratulations on your acceptance to medical school. That's the first congratulations.
Thank you so much.
The second thing is let's do a quick little who are you? Tell me about yourself type interview question so that students get an idea of kind of your journey to where you've gotten at this point, and then we'll dive into your application.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Maral. I'm originally from Iran. I lived there till I was 17. And then I moved to Australia, started learning English as a second language, which was really, really hard. I do remember in biology class, I had to learn English and a completely new terminology. So it was really, really difficult. After that, after spending in Australia for 4 years, I moved to the US in Florida. And I just graduated from FAU with my bachelor's degree in biological science. And after waiting for numerous months, I finally got off the wait list for my top choice medical school, and I'm going to medical school. Yay!
Yay! You're going to be a doctor. Yay! That's awesome. What was it like did you get a phone call or an email from the school?
I did get a phone call.
What was it like to get that phone call? Number one, like nobody answers like phone numbers we don't recognize anymore. So was it like, wait a minute, this might be the medical school. Should I answer? Should I not? What was it like to get that phone call?
So I was waiting for a phone call from my university, but it was from a personal phone call. It was from a personal mobile phone number just because the campus is closed. And I was debating whether I should pick it up or pick it not. And I was outside, actually. I was waiting for my grandma who was doing an x-ray, and I was waiting in the waiting room. So I was like, you know what, let me just pick it up. I picked it up, and the second the admission committee the admission director said, hi, I recognized her voice. I was like, hi. And then he tortured me for a good 5 minutes. He was saying, hey, so yeah, we got your letter of intent. We have your application on file. We heard you got into another medical school. We were wondering whether you're going, whether you're still waiting for us. And I said, yes. And I already paid the deposit for the other school. And they were saying, so you already paid a deposit. Maybe it's best that you go there. We don't want you to lose money. They kept asking me whether I'm sure, whether I'm not. And I was saying, yes, absolutely. I want to go. And after 5 minutes, they said, okay, so you're accepted. So I was screaming in the waiting room. I was tearing up. I was super happy. I didn't believe it. It was all sorts of emotions, and I was super happy. I'm still in shock, and I will never forget that phone call. It was the best day.
That's amazing. Congratulations. That's the best stories I love are those acceptance phone calls. The students just going crazy on the phone and then apologizing. I'm sorry. That's awesome. For you as an immigrant to this country, as English as a second language student, what was the hardest part for you through this whole application process?
I would say probably navigating through the whole process and gaining the accurate information, because when I got here, I had no idea like what a pre-med is. From Iran or Australia, they didn't have such a thing. So I was like, wait, what is a pre-med? And then after realizing, oh, okay, I'm a pre-med apparently, I had to like look up their requirements, take the courses that were necessary. I had to repeat some courses. And then for the whole MCAT, I had so much struggle to gaining enough information, how to study, and then eventually how to actually apply. I didn't even know there was something primary application, secondary application. Everything was totally new to me.
Yeah.
So that was probably the hardest part.
Okay. And just for clarification, if you want to say, were you an international applicant or no? You have your residency or citizenship here now.
I have my residency here.
Okay, so not an international applicant. You are an immigrant, but not an international applicant. Big difference. So that's awesome. So if I saw a comment come across about an international applicant, if you want an international applicant, I've interviewed several on the Pre-Med Years podcast, so you can go listen to those. All right, you ready to dive into your application and see what we can see? Yeah. So we have your application. Thank you again so much for having the courage to put yourself out here like this to help so many students. Again, these applications are the application renovation videos, and hopefully these mission accepted videos will be really helpful for students. So one of the things right away, right, we redacted where you're from, but you talked about it. So coming from Iran and coming to the States, a lot of people don't know that usually you're not classified as a underrepresented minority. They're like Iranians and Middle Eastern, like a lot of times you classify yourself as white, right? You have to classify yourself as white. Isn't that right? So
yeah, there's an option for us.
Yeah. So when it comes to the application, like you're like in this weird spot, like, well, I'm not like white like Ryan. I'm not. So it's just a weird spot. And I wanted to flag that because a lot of underrepresented minorities, a lot of Middle Eastern people coming from the Middle Eastern countries and coming to the States applying, they think maybe they're at an advantage, but a lot of times they're not, because you can't really classify yourself as something other than white on the application. So that's just something I wanted to point off right off the bat. And so we'll have that there. You have your languages in here. English, obviously not used in your child's home. You spoke Persian. And we have your disadvantaged essay here. So you marked yourself as disadvantaged, right? And you have an explanation here. So let's read this real quick. So I was born and raised and we redacted some of the locations and stuff. Your city lacked proper educational, social, medical standards. Ended up emigrating by yourself to another country. So right away, I'm like, oh, wow. Like that obviously takes a lot of courage, a lot of guts to move out of your home country by yourself. You mentioned it, I think, later on, but you didn't mention it here at the what age you had moved. I think it was 17 that you mentioned.
Yeah, I had it in my personal statement.
Yeah. You remember when you first started junior high school, I did not understand what my teacher was talking about. I was an immigrant. One of the most difficult obstacles we face is the language, right? So just a very obvious thing where language is a huge barrier. It's impossible to understand what's going on around you. New culture, new language. So obviously that puts you at a disadvantage when you're, especially in these formative years, as you're trying to figure out what it is you want to do and how to do it. So being frustrated, left out, even shy to say or write something wrong, right? So this is, I love ESL students, but like, I just watched a lot of TV and I learned English. I love that, right? Read, talk, watch TV, did everything possible to learn English. So you're just painting this picture of being an immigrant to a new country, new culture, new language. So awesome stuff here. Now, again, kind of this weird situation where you're the only person in your family who speaks English. So it's not even like something where you can continue to get support and reinforce that new language. Financial instability, obviously really hard, especially with everything that's going on in Iran with sanctions and everything else. I've talked to several students who, like, they were getting support from their family, and then with sanctions from the U.S. government, all of that money kind of went away. So it's a really hard situation. So a lot of just difficulty, right? A lot of obstacles that you've had to overcome, and then a nice little positive statement here at the end. None of these obstacles deterred me from my goal. Instead, they showed me that to achieve life goals, there will always be challenges to tackle. So I like the positivity. I probably could have used a little bit more positivity, but I think you did a good job there.
Thank you.
All right. And then you can see, so students don't often understand. So this SES disadvantage, so that's social, I always forget what social SES. So anyway, for some reason I can't think. Right, I've been on for a lot of hours. This is automatically calculated based on your parents' education level and occupation, I believe. Socioeconomic status. It finally came to me. Thank you. All right. All right. And then we go into your transcript, your grades. And so now it makes sense. University of Melbourne. I'm like, that's interesting. Why did she go to University of Melbourne? But you moved to Australia to begin with, you said, right? So you moved to Australia at 17. It looks like you started college there and you struggled. You struggled a lot. What was that struggle to begin with?
So I did high school there, which was so much easier than my home country. But when I got to university, I didn't have much support from university or from friends. It was just so difficult to navigate through the whole process. And meanwhile, I had to work to pay for my bills and everything because of the whole sanctions. I couldn't get that much support from my family either.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't manage my time well. It was such a struggle. I kind of slacked off. I was going out with my friends to kind of get my mind off things. And then instead of focusing on studying or managing my time and having a good plan for my future, it kind of, I just fell out of my whole goals and whole future. And that's what all the B's and C's are coming from.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting, right? This obviously isn't a political discussion, but it's interesting. A lot of people potentially have never been exposed to someone from Iran who is trying to go to medical school, et cetera. But hearing the ramifications, and again, I've talked to several students who have been in similar situations, hearing the ramifications of our government's sanctions on Iran's government and how that ripples through the whole country and potentially has the negative, the deleterious effect of holding down a whole population, because now the kids who are in college abroad or whatever else aren't getting the education they need or can't afford the education or struggling through the education because they have to work. And so it's not just a government to government thing, but it really punishes the whole country. But anyway, not a political thing, but I thought it was just an interesting thing to point out. So as you hear reports of sanctions and stuff like that, don't just think of the government, think of everyone. So something I usually point out, but I didn't hear, is submission date. So you submitted early, which is great, 16, so June 16th. And you can see, even though you were relatively early, two plus weeks after it opening, it took almost a whole month to get processed. So it took a little bit of time. And then once you came to the U.S., so you did freshman year there in Australia, you came to the U.S. at Palm Beach State College. I'm assuming this is a community college?
It is a community college, yes.
Okay. What was the switch for you that went from C's and B's to A's?
So first thing, the classes were so much smaller. I had a great relationship with all my professors, and I really wanted to change all of those grades and have a turning point in my own life. So I started planning my life, studying since day one, and then having a great communication with my professors. I remember my ENC 1101 kept asking me why my whole essay structure is weird, and I had to explain it every time. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get used to it. I'll promise for next time, I'll get used to it. So all of those really, I started building a relationship with my professors, and she actually gave me a letter of recommendation for it.
That's awesome. Okay.
So I started from Palm Beach State College. Classes were so much smaller, and I had a great support from my family and from my professors and friends there.
Perfect. Yeah, those relationships are awesome. The support there is great. So great job with that. As you were talking, I was scrolling through straight A's once you came to the States. So you obviously crushed your academics once you came to the States. But a lot of students are scared because that initial freshman year on your transcript, right? You can see it had a pretty bad effect, right? The 237 to begin with, that was a lot of credit hours, but a 4.0 moving forward, you ended up with a 357, which is about average, right? For applying to medical school, your all other 364, total 359. So from a GPA standpoint, it's like, okay, it's kind of average, nothing spectacular. And this is where I always want to tell students, right? It's not this number. It's what does this trend look like? And we talked earlier, I don't know if you saw the stuff we're doing with Mapped, but Mapped will be able to look at this number, this number, this number, this number, and go, you're doing amazing. Who cares about this number, right? Yeah, this number's here, but based on your trend, you are going to be great. So good job there. And then we get to your MCAT score. And your MCAT score, talk about your MCAT and being an ESL student. What was that like?
A real struggle. It was so hard. The hardest part of getting into medical school was the MCAT for me. Not only I had to literally memorize every single thing, but I had to do cars. Literally, if you would give me the entire time in the whole universe, I wouldn't be able to understand what was going on, what they wanted from me. And it was just so hard for me to do it. And as you can see, I did not do well in the car section at all. It was actually lower than all my practice tests that I took. And the reason is literally the first question that I saw, I panicked so hard that I completely changed my strategies that I practiced for them for few months. I wasn't even sticking to them. I was doing something completely different. I don't even know what I was doing. But yeah.
You obviously you did well in all of the sections except for cars, and a lot of students, they'll see this and they'll get feedback from advisors, from other people, that they can't apply with that score. Did you get any feedback like that, or did you just I'm gonna apply and see what happens?
I did. I got both feedbacks. They were telling me it's very school dependent. Some schools, they really care about the total score of the MCAT. Some schools were telling me no, they will look at every single section, and if one of them is below whatever score, they're not gonna review my application. So it was very school dependent. Yep. But I was strongly advised to take the MCAT twice. I did not, but if I go back in time, I would retake it for sure.
Yeah. You would go back and retake it. Okay.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, and especially that situation, the story that you said of I panicked and I changed the way that I did the test. If you were scoring higher, right, a higher MCAT score obviously opens more doors. Period. And so if this was a fluke bad score, and you're I know I can score better, then why not potentially retake it? But you didn't, and that's okay. And then we get to your experiences. So let's just quickly run through these just to look overall. So we have some leadership experience as a treasurer, 100 hours over the last year, physician shadowing earlier on in the application. So it stopped right before you submitted your application. Not a ton of hours. It looked like it was a specific program here. So that's shadowing. You got more shadowing here, 45 hours a year. That's a few months before that. And we have chemistry bonding leader, whatever. What is that? Is that like a TA kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, that's how they call it. It's a bonding session, just because chemistry is related to bonding, so that's how they call it.
That's a great nerdy title, a bonding leader. So you can see, obviously, you're a leadership position teaching that. A lot of people put these kinds of things as leadership positions. It's interesting. Sometimes I typically don't recommend leadership for teaching because there is a separate teaching category. So. But that works for that. And then we'll look at some of these descriptions a little bit in a minute, because those stood out to me. We got some research, some sea turtle research, right, which is great, right? You don't have to be in a lab working the micropipette. Any research will work. We got president's list on here, which is awesome. Some medical and clinical experience, which wasn't up earlier, but we have some here for, looks like a quick little trip for 100 hours to Ghana. Some more medical clinical stuff here. Standardized patient. Interesting. So this is another one. A lot of students put standardized patient as clinical experience. I probably wouldn't recommend that because it's not like you interacting with the patient, it's you interacting with medical students. And so it's not true like interaction with a patient. So that's interesting. It is definitely a clinical type experience, but usually for this categorization, I wouldn't count that. But it's an awesome experience if anyone has that opportunity. We have research, more research lab, 2018, some fundraising for, is that the same organization that you went to Ghana with?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Some more volunteering there, some more shadowing in 2017. So good breadth of experiences and volunteering in the ER department. So you got some more classic experience there. And we got hobbies, playing the piano. So tons of experience there. And you have a little story there to go with it. All right. So as we quickly go through, a lot of people, again, if you've watched my application renovation videos, you know that I don't like just what you did. I did this, 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 right? The job description stuff. And as I looked at your application, right, I immediately see stories, right? When I see names and quotes, I'm like, all right, there's a story here. Let me see what's going on. My first day being a standardized patient, I was paired with William and Nancy, who were first year medical students. I'd memorized the scripts to act schizophrenic, and they were trying to figure out the problem by taking a history, right? The story here is cool. You have earlier up here, you have, right, your first patient was a 3-month-old baby. The second she felt the needle on the test kit, she started crying so loud, and I looked horrified, right? The story, it's not, this is what we did, this is how many people we helped, this is like, I learned how to be empathetic, I learned how to be compassionate. You have stories here and examples here that back up kind of who you are as a person. Let me see if I have some other good ones here. Right here for this chemistry bonding leader, you have Kevin, a graduate student, also joined us. He made time for each one of us and gave us individualized feedback, even though it took me around 2 months to learn how to slow down my speaking speed. He was always supportive, right? Here, a student that you helped. Rose was an art major student who had difficulty understanding chemistry principles, but desperately wanted to receive an A in the course. And you have the story of how you helped her. It wasn't, as a chemistry bonding leader, I had to adapt to the individual needs of students and make sure that they were successful. I graded tests and I helped create curriculum, right? That's what most students write. I'm like, yes, that's what you did. But who did you affect? How did it affect you? Talk about those experiences. So you did a really good job focusing on the impact and not just what you did. So that was a great thing. And then we come to your personal statement, and again, people want to pause this later on and look through these, they can. We come to your personal statement, and again, it shows that you're an ESL student, right? The grammar isn't 100% perfect, but it's going to be known, right? Coming from another country, coming to the States, being an ESL student, the person reading this is going to go, okay, like it's not going to be 100% perfect, and that's okay. So you start off with a story, right? Playing with Lego bricks. I love that you call them Lego bricks and not Legos. This is the correct way to say Lego bricks. So A for that effort, right? And you overheard MRI. You didn't know what it meant, but your mom is crying, and obviously it wasn't good, right? So immediately I'm like, brought into a story of what's going on in your world. And it's a story about your brother and how he was intellectually disabled and what that was like for your family and how that impacted you. So in the terms of like my personal statement book, right, this is your seed. This is the moment, the time in your life that impacted you to make you want to explore medicine. And you say, I wanted to be sure that other children with similar difficulties were ensured a more caring treatment. right? This was your seed. Now you have, it's a little negative because of where you grew up and the kind of paternalistic way that medicine was, how physicians, you said here, weren't completely transparent. And so it was a little negative towards that. I'll give it a little bit of a pass. I usually try to avoid negativity, but it made sense here. I understood why you were saying that. So you left the country. Here's where you said you left at 17. So you talked about moving to Australia, and then moving again here to the States. And you have an experience here where you get into a story of what you did and how it affected you. So you're on this, what looks like a mission trip, and what you did. So a little bit of what you did, but then you get into a story, which is great, right? This is what I love. I want to see who you are. And through this story, I can see who you are. Again, probably a little bit more quote unquote telling than I like, but again, being an ESL student, it's a lot harder to get to that showing way of writing a personal statement as an ESL student. So I think you did a great job because you got into the story, you showed what happened, and then you reflected on it and said, here, it was heartbreaking for me, made me feel powerless, but it also inspired me to have a passion to care for those in need of medical care, specifically for those who have no access to healthcare, right? You reflected on the story and why it was impactful for you. So this is a really good job. Again, another story here, shadowing. Again, being there has motivated me once again to work hard towards my goal of becoming a physician in order to have the appropriate knowledge and power to help someone in need of medical attention. I understand, right? I'm seeing what you're doing, how you're impacting, and why it's important to you. So that's good. And then you get into a nice little takeaway here, conclusion. I want most to be compassionate, patient, honest, a good listener, observer, and caring. I have become aware of the lack of access to quality medical care in poor communities. I have realized that each person deserves love and medical care equally. All right, so you just a really good conclusion here. I can see obviously where you've come from, what you've experienced, what is important to you. Right? I can see that access to healthcare is important to you. I can see that a quality of care is important to you. So I know who you are, at least based on what you've told me. I understand a little bit of who you are. So really good job really showing who you are. And that at the end of the application renovation videos, the answer is almost always like, I don't know who you are. I just know what you want me to hear. And I don't think you did a bad job in that sense, right? You didn't try to sell me on being empathetic and compassionate and all these other things. So great job there.
Thank you.
You have your school lists. I think you did a good job, right? Being in Florida looks like potentially is where you are at. Obviously going to FAU. Florida has luckily a lot of medical schools that you can pick from. The out-of-state schools that you selected are private schools, which is great. Albany, I believe, is private. Cal University, private. Geisinger, private. GW, private. So you did a great job not applying to public out-of-state schools and potentially wasting your money applying to those schools. Overall, I think it's a really, really good application. And obviously you got 2 acceptances. I think one to a DO and one to an MD school.
Yes.
And you're going to be a doctor. So yeah, thank you so much for, again, sharing your screen and sharing your application and letting me share my screen with your application on it. Any just kind of last minute comments on what we were able to talk about and share?
I would say, first of all, good luck to everyone who are applying this year. I know it's really, really tough. I've been there in a better situation with no coronavirus around, and it was really, really hard. So I know the struggle, and you just have to get through it. It's just the whole process. We're all in the same boat. We all have to go through this entire process. And I feel like it's a waiting game because I waited for a long time just to get into my top choice medical school. And what I would advise is communicate with the school. Let them know that you're interested. Let them know who you are. Send them updates. Just let them know that you really want to get into their school. And they would appreciate it for sure.
Yeah. And it helped, right? You were a student who had an acceptance and were able to say, I'm going to give up that other acceptance. I'm going to give up that deposit and come to you. So it really gives them, because the medical schools are trying to make sure that they get their number right. They don't want to accept people and then be short. They don't want to over accept people and be over. So they do want to make sure that they're accepting the right people. So congratulations. Thank you so much for being a part of this and sharing and being vulnerable. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for allowing me to help
Yeah.
others.